She had always lived a quiet life, the kind of life where days seemed to blend together and nothing ever truly surprising happened. She worked at a small bakery in her town, waking up early every morning to the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of the ovens. The town itself was peaceful, the kind where everyone knew each other and news traveled faster than the wind. She liked it that way. Life was predictable, comfortable, and safe. But deep down, she felt there was something missing, a space in her heart that longed for adventure, for a story that would change everything. Her friends often teased her about it. They would say, "You're too careful. You'll hide behind your comfort, afraid of anything new." She would smile, sometimes laugh along, but inside, she knew they were right. She had spent so many years following a routine, never daring to step outside the line she had drawn for herself. Yet, she never expected that the moment to change her life would come in the form of a letter. It arrived on a regular Tuesday morning. The sun had just risen, casting a gentle golden light over the rooftops of the town. She was opening the bakery, arranging pastries on the shelves when the mail slipped under the door caught her attention. Usually it was bills or advertisements, the kind of letters that faded into the background of life. But this one was different. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, and had her name written in bold, elegant handwriting. She paused, a strange flutter running through her chest. She didn't recognize the sender, and that made her hands tremble slightly as she carefully tore it open. Inside was a card, simple but elegant, with a message that made her heart stop. It was a proposal, a marriage proposal. She read it over and over, trying to make sense of the words. The writer claimed to know her well, admired her, and wanted to share a life together. But she didn't remember ever meeting him in a meaningful way. How could someone she barely knew want to marry her? Her mind raced. The town was small, but it wasn't tiny. She could picture the whispers that would follow if anyone knew she had received such a proposal. People would gossip, question her judgment, wonder why someone she barely knew was asking for her hand in marriage. Despite the shock, there was something about the letter that stirred curiosity inside her. The words were sincere, the tone respectful, and somehow, there was a spark of excitement she couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, she found herself thinking about the proposal constantly. She told no one at first, afraid of their reactions and judgment. She would sit at her little kitchen table after work, holding the card in her hands, imagining what life would be like if she said yes. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, both terrifying and thrilling. The idea of leaving behind the ordinary and stepping into the unknown was scary, but it also promised a life she had never dared to imagine. Finally, curiosity overcame her fear. She decided to meet him, to understand why he had chosen her out of everyone in the world. When they first met, it was in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. He was taller than she imagined, with a calm demeanor that made it hard to read his thoughts. His eyes were kind, but there was something mysterious about them, something that suggested he carried the weight of experiences she could not yet understand. They talked for hours. He spoke of his life, the places he had been, the challenges he had faced. She listened, a mixture of awe and disbelief swirling inside her. He seemed genuine, sincere, and yet the whirlwind of his world contrasted sharply with her own simple existence. She had never lived a life like his, and yet for some reason she felt drawn to it, drawn to him. When he asked her again if she would marry him, this time in person, she felt her heart leap. It was as if the universe had shifted in that moment, opening a door to something entirely new. Without fully understanding why, she said yes. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but it was one made from a place deep inside her. A place that had longed for change, for adventure, for a story worth telling. Word of their engagement spread quickly. As expected, reactions were mixed. Friends and family were shocked, as some expressed concern, questioning whether she truly knew the man she was marrying. Others were curious, eager to see how this unusual match would play out. But despite the doubts and whispers, she felt a sense of empowerment she had never known before. She had made her choice, and for the first time in her life, felt like the world had opened up to her possibilities she had never imagined. In the following weeks, preparations for the wedding began. The man came with resources she had never seen in her life. Invitations were sent to hundreds of people, some from distant places she had never visited. The scale of the celebration was overwhelming, and she often found herself retreating to quiet corners to process the whirlwind around her. She tried to focus on what she could control, the small details of her life that remained hers. But even these were influenced by the grandeur that was slowly consuming her reality. Her friends tried to support her, but even they seemed unsure of how to react. Some whispered behind her back, worried that she was stepping into a world that might not have her best interests at heart. Others encouraged her, saying that she had a chance at a life many only dreamed of. And through it all, she felt a mixture of fear and excitement, realizing that life as she had known it was changing forever. As the days passed, she began to notice small signs that hinted at the complexity of the man she had agreed to marry. There were hints of sadness in his eyes at times, moments of hesitation when he spoke of his past. Yet he always smiled, always reassured her, and always made her feel as if she were the most important person in the world. She wanted to trust him, to believe that love could be built even from the most unusual beginnings. Despite the grandeur of the preparations, she found herself reflecting on her own life, her quiet mornings. The smell of fresh bread in the bakery, the simple joys that had once defined her world. She wondered if she was ready to leave all that behind. Could she adapt to a life so different from everything she had known? Could she truly love someone she had only just met, despite the admiration and excitement he had sparked in her heart? Days grew shorter, the wedding day approaching faster than she could fully comprehend. She spent her evenings walking through the town, thinking about what awaited her. She saw familiar faces, the same streets she had walked her entire life, and she realized that nothing would ever be the same after this. She felt a strange mix of nostalgia and anticipation, knowing that she was standing on the edge of a life-changing decision that would ripple through her existence forever. And so, the quiet young woman who had once been content with simple days and predictable routines now found herself at the center of a story that no one could have predicted. Her heart raced with fear and excitement, and deep down, she knew that the choice she had made would not only change her life, but also leave the people around her speechless. The proposal that had arrived like an ordinary letter had become the beginning of something extraordinary. A story that was only just beginning to unfold. The day of the wedding arrived faster than anyone had expected. The entire town was buzzing with excitement, and even those who had tried to remain indifferent found themselves caught in the wave of anticipation. The streets seemed brighter that morning, decorated with colorful banners and flowers that had been carefully arranged over the previous nights. There was music in the air, laughter, and a sense of celebration that made it almost impossible not to feel swept up in the moment. She woke up early, as usual, though the day was far from ordinary. The sun had barely risen, but her mind was already racing. She sat at her small dressing table, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the delicate fabric of her wedding dress. It was beautiful, unlike anything she had ever imagined wearing. The lace was intricate, the color a soft cream that made her feel like she was stepping into a dream. Yet beneath the excitement, a nervous tension tugged at her heart. She thought of the people she had known all her life. Friends, neighbors, the familiar faces of the town who had watched her grow up. They would all be there today. Some would celebrate her happiness genuinely, while others might whisper doubts behind their hands. She had heard the whispers already. The murmurs of people questioning the match, the sudden proposal, and the life she was about to enter. She tried not to let it bother her, but a small part of her worried. What if they were right? What if she had made a mistake? The man she had agreed to marry arrived early, arriving quietly in a sleek, black car that seemed out of place among the humble homes and cobblestone streets of the town. He carried himself with a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with her fluttering nerves. When he entered the room, he gave her a gentle smile, one that was meant to reassure her, and in that moment, she felt a flicker of courage. He took her hand, squeezing it softly, and she realized that, despite all the uncertainty, she trusted him, at least for now. The ceremony was set in a grand hall, decorated with flowers, crystal chandeliers, and soft glowing lights. Guests arrived in their finest attire, their expressions ranging from awe to curiosity. There were distant relatives she had never met, friends of the groom she did not know, and townspeople who had come simply to witness the spectacle. Everyone seemed to sense that this wedding was different from anything they had experienced before as she walked down the aisle. She felt eyes on her from every direction. Some looked with admiration, others with skepticism. She focused on the man waiting at the end, his eyes fixed on her. The sound of her own heartbeat seemed loud in her ears, and for a moment the world around her faded. She remembered all the quiet mornings she had spent baking bread, the simple routines of her life, and how far she had come from those moments. She felt both small and immense, like she had stepped onto a stage larger than she had ever imagined. The ceremony itself was beautiful, traditional yet infused with touches that reflected both of their personalities. The officiant spoke words of love, commitment, and hope, and she repeated them with sincerity, even as a nervous tremor ran through her voice. She glanced at her groom, who seemed perfectly composed, and wondered how he could remain so calm while she felt like she might float away. But then he reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. She felt grounded again. After the vows, the applause was overwhelming. People cheered, clapped, and some even wiped tears from their eyes. The wedding had already left the town speechless, just as the title of her story promised it would. But beneath the beauty and celebration, she could sense an undercurrent of tension. There were glances exchanged between relatives, whispers she could not fully hear, and an invisible weight that seemed to hang over the festivities. She tried to ignore it, reminding herself that today was about joy and new beginnings. The reception was held in a sprawling garden next to the hall. Tables were laden with exquisite food, desserts that looked like art, and drinks sparkling in crystal glasses. Musicians played soft melodies, and children ran between the tables, their laughter mingling with the conversations of adults. She walked among the guests, smiling, thanking people for coming, and feeling a strange mix of pride and anxiety. The grandeur of the event was both thrilling and overwhelming, and she realized that she had never truly been the center of attention before. Her groom moved through the crowd with ease, greeting friends and family, sharing stories, and making people laugh. She watched him, fascinated by his ability to navigate the complexities of social interaction with charm and confidence. It was something she admired, though a part of her wondered if she could ever feel comfortable in such a world. She had spent her life in quiet simplicity, and now she was surrounded by opulence, expectation, and scrutiny. As the evening progressed, small tensions began to surface. Relatives argued quietly over seating arrangements, some guests seemed dissatisfied with the menu, and a few whispered concerns about the scale of the event. She felt the weight of these dynamics pressing against her, a reminder that this was not just a celebration, but also a test of her ability to adapt. She tried to focus on the joy around her, the laughter of friends, and the beauty of the night. But the undercurrents were impossible to ignore completely. There were also moments of warmth that reminded her why she had made the choice to step into this new life. Friends who had supported her quietly, distant relatives who shared kind words, and even strangers who came to offer congratulations all reminded her that this world, though complex, held genuine kindness. She realized that life was never entirely predictable, that even amidst the grandeur and tension, there could be moments of connection and love that were pure and simple. At one point, she found herself standing alone near a fountain, watching the water catch the light of the evening. She thought of how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. The letter, the proposal, the decision to marry, and now this spectacular celebration. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing that the choices she had made would have consequences she could not yet foresee. But she also felt a sense of empowerment, a realization that she had stepped into a story that was entirely her own, even if it was unfolding in ways she could not control. As the night wore on, the dance began. The groom extended his hand to her, and she took it, letting him lead her across the floor. The music was soft, the movements graceful, and for a moment it felt as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. She could feel the warmth of his presence, the steadiness of his hand, and a strange comfort in the rhythm of the dance. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to truly enjoy the moment, to forget the whispers, the doubts, and the tension, and simply be present in the experience. Guests joined in, Couples danced, children twirled, and laughter filled the air. The wedding, which had begun as a spectacle that left people speechless, was now transforming into an evening of joy, connection, and shared happiness. She moved among the guests, smiling, laughing, and for a brief moment, feeling as though she belonged in this world of elegance and celebration. Yet, even in these moments of happiness, small signs reminded her that life was never simple. She noticed fleeting expressions on her groom's face, a subtle hesitation in his movements, and moments where his laughter didn't quite reach his eyes. There were hints of a past she did not yet fully understand, shadows of complexity that would become more apparent in the days to come. She didn't know what they meant yet, but she felt a quiet awareness that her journey was only beginning, and that the real challenges would lie beyond the glitter and applause of the wedding day as the night drew to a close. She sat quietly for a moment, watching guests leave, exchanging hugs and taking final photographs. The hall slowly emptied, leaving behind the lingering scent of flowers, candles, and a night that had been extraordinary in every way. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, knowing that she had experienced something truly remarkable. Yet beneath it all, a quiet voice inside reminded her that the story was far from over. The wedding had been a beginning, not an ending, and the days to come would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. She left the hall with her groom, stepping into a waiting car that would take them to their first night as husband and wife. The streets were quiet now, the festive decorations fading into the shadows. She felt the weight of the day settle upon her. She realized that life had changed forever, that the ordinary world she had known was gone, replaced by a reality that was complex, beautiful, and unpredictable. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time in her life, understood that happiness was not just about comfort or routine. It was about stepping into the unknown, embracing change, and finding strength in the choices she made. The wedding had left people speechless, yes, but it had also revealed something deeper: the power of courage, the beauty of love, and the beginning of a journey that would shape her life in ways she could never have imagined. And as the car drove her away from the hall, she held her groom's hand, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. She knew that the true story was only beginning, that the days ahead would challenge her, surprise her, and perhaps even change her in ways she could not yet foresee. But for now, she allowed herself to breathe, to savor the quiet moments, and to reflect on the extraordinary day that had left everyone around her amazed, wondering, and speechless. After the wedding, life seemed to settle into a new rhythm, but the calm was only temporary. The young woman found herself navigating a world far more complicated than she had imagined. The days that followed were filled with well-wishers, gifts, and congratulations, yet beneath the surface, she began to notice subtle signs that things were not as perfect as they had appeared on the wedding day at first. It was small details, a hurried phone call she overheard, a hesitant answer when she asked about his day, or a shadow of worry in his eyes. She tried not to read too much into them, telling herself that weddings were stressful, and everyone had private matters to attend to. But as the days turned into weeks, a pattern began to emerge, and she could no longer ignore the unease building in her heart. It began when she discovered letters and documents tucked away in drawers she hadn't opened before. They were not addressed to her, yet they seemed important, full of financial details, legal papers, and correspondence that hinted at past conflicts and complicated business dealings. She did not understand all the words, but the tone was serious, even urgent. Her curiosity and concern grew, mingling with a sense of fear. She realized that she had married someone with a life far more complex than the quiet, composed person she thought she knew. She tried to speak to him about it, choosing her words carefully so as not to seem accusatory. She asked simple questions, hoping for simple answers. But he would smile, nod, and give vague reassurances. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he said. "Everything will be fine." She wanted to believe him, and part of her did, but another part of her felt a growing tension, a feeling that something important was being hidden. Meanwhile, the town that had been so captivated by the wedding began to notice changes too. People who had admired the spectacle now whispered about the aftermath. Some guests spoke of odd behaviors, subtle conflicts, or disagreements that had occurred during the celebrations. Others wondered if the glamorous wedding had hidden deeper issues, questions about compatibility, trust, and honesty. The whispers reached her ears eventually, and while she tried to ignore them, they planted seeds of doubt she could not easily shake. One afternoon, she received a visit from a distant relative who had known her groom longer than she had. The relative spoke cautiously, choosing words carefully, and at first she did not understand the implications. But soon, she realized the stories were about previous relationships, failed commitments, and the challenges her groom had faced in life before meeting her. Each story seemed more complicated than the last, leaving her feeling overwhelmed. She listened quietly, nodding, absorbing the information, but inside, a storm was brewing. She felt betrayed and confused, unsure of what was true and what was exaggeration. That evening, she sat alone in the study, surrounded by the quiet hum of the house. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the floor, and she felt the weight of the day pressing down on her. She went over every detail she had learned, every conversation, every letter, every subtle sign she had noticed. It felt as if the foundation of her life had shifted, leaving her in a place where certainty no longer existed. She wondered if she had made a mistake, if she had acted too quickly, if she had been blinded by the excitement of a fairy tale wedding. Despite the fear, there was also a spark of determination inside her. She realized that she could not simply ignore the truth, that she needed to understand the life she had stepped into fully. The man she had married was not the person she thought she knew, and while she cared for him, she needed clarity. She resolved to investigate, to ask questions, and to confront the realities of their situation, no matter how difficult it might be. Over the next few days, she began carefully gathering information. She spoke to friends, family, and acquaintances who had known him for years. She asked gentle, probing questions, listening closely to stories of past marriages, financial challenges, and social expectations. Each piece of information added to a complex picture, one that revealed a man shaped by experiences she could never have imagined. He had faced hardships, made difficult choices, and carried burdens that were often hidden from the public eye. At the same time, she observed him closely, watching his habits, his reactions. In his interactions with others, she noticed moments of vulnerability when he would pause, seem lost in thought, or show signs of genuine concern. She realized that behind the composed exterior, there was a depth she had never seen before, a combination of strength, resilience, and perhaps even regret. She began to understand that the life he had led was not simple, and that their journey together would require patience, empathy, and courage. There were times when doubt threatened to overwhelm her. She would lie awake at night, imagining scenarios that scared her, thinking about the possibility of betrayal or disappointment. She questioned her own judgment, wondering if she had been too naive, too eager to embrace change. But there were also moments of hope, when she remembered the sincerity in his eyes, kindness in his words, and the genuine moments of connection they had shared. These moments reminded her why she had chosen to marry him, why she had believed in the possibility of a life together. Despite the challenges as the weeks passed, the couple began having deeper conversations about their pasts, their fears, and their expectations. These talks were not always easy. Sometimes they ended in frustration or tears as truths collided with assumptions and hopes met reality. Yet, with each conversation, they learned more about each other, discovering the layers of personality, experience, and emotion that shaped who they were. She began to see him as a human being with flaws, strengths, and a history that could not be ignored. The community around them continued to react in its usual way, some supportive, some critical. But she learned to focus less on the opinions of others and more on understanding the reality of her marriage. She realized that people's perceptions were often based on appearances, rumors, or incomplete information, and that her own experience was what truly mattered. This realization gave her a sense of strength, a reminder that she had agency in her own life and could navigate the challenges. ahead with intelligence and courage. One afternoon, she discovered a particularly significant piece of information on revelation about his past that explained much of the behavior and decisions she had observed since their marriage. It was a story of hardship, sacrifice, and difficult choices. A narrative that filled in the gaps she had been struggling to understand. Reading it, she felt a mix of empathy, surprise, and even admiration. She realized that the man she had married was far more complex than she had imagined, shaped by circumstances that had tested him in ways few could understand. This discovery changed the way she approached their relationship. She no longer viewed him simply as a charming, mysterious figure. She saw him as a person who had lived a full, sometimes difficult life, and who had chosen to share it with her. She began to approach their conversations and interactions with more patience, asking questions with genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. Slowly, a deeper understanding began to form, one built not on appearances or assumptions, but on knowledge, empathy, and trust. Yet even as clarity emerged, challenges remained. There were still questions she could not answer, uncertainties that lingered, and moments when fear threatened to return. She recognized that understanding someone fully was a lifelong process, and that patience, communication, and mutual respect would be essential in navigating their future together. The complexity of his life was daunting, but she felt a growing confidence in her ability to face it, knowing that she had chosen to step into this story intentionally, with eyes wide open in the quiet moments. She reflected on how far she had come from a simple life of routine and comfort to the extraordinary, unpredictable world she now inhabited. She realized that the wedding had been only the beginning, a spectacle that captured attention but did not reveal the full depth of the journey ahead. The true story lay in the days, weeks, and months to come, the moments of discovery, the challenges faced together, and the growth that would inevitably follow. As she prepared for the coming days, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her choices mattered, that her voice was important, and that her willingness to confront reality with courage and empathy would shape not only her own life, but the life they were building together. The revelations of the past had been startling, even unsettling, but they had also opened the door to understanding, connection, and a deeper sense of partnership. And so, with determination and hope, she continued to navigate this new world, aware that life was complex, unpredictable, and sometimes difficult, but also filled with opportunities for love, growth, and transformation. The story of their lives was unfolding in ways she could not have imagined, and while the path ahead was uncertain, she felt ready to face it one step at a time. With a heart open to both challenges and the unexpected joys that life had to offer, life after the revelations had settled into a strange rhythm, a mix of clarity and tension. She had learned more about the man she had married, yet the questions and challenges continued to grow. Each day brought something new, letters to read, conversations to navigate, and choices to make that seemed heavier than anything she had faced before. She realized that marriage was far more than love or excitement. It was understanding, patience, courage combined. She began to pay closer attention to her surroundings, noticing small details she had overlooked before. There were subtle signs in the way the staff managed the household, in the way neighbors reacted when they saw her, and in the way her husband interacted with certain people. Everything seemed layered with meaning. It became clear that she could not take anything at face value. Understanding required observation, thought, and sometimes courage to confront uncomfortable truths. One morning, she found a folder of documents hidden in a drawer she had not checked before. It contained letters, legal papers, and financial statements that hinted at problems she had only suspected. Some were old, some recent, and all pointed to challenges her husband had faced long before she arrived. It was overwhelming. She spread the papers across the table and took a deep breath. She could have turned away, pretended she had not seen them, but a quiet voice inside her insisted that she confront reality. The decision she made was not easy. She began asking questions gently, carefully, trying not to sound accusatory. Some answers were immediate, others delayed, and some remained vague. She discovered issues she had never imagined, strained family relationships, and secrets that could affect her life directly. The weight of the discoveries pressed on her chest, yet she felt a strange determination. She realized that this was a turning point. She could either ignore the truth and live in uncertainty, or she could face it, no matter how difficult it might be. As days passed, she reached out to people she trusted, friends, distant relatives, and even acquaintances of her husband. She asked questions, listened to stories, and slowly began to piece together a clearer picture of the life she had entered. The process was exhausting but enlightening. She discovered patterns, motives, and decisions that explained much of what she had seen but had not understood. Each revelation brought relief, fear, or sometimes both at once. She realized that understanding required patience and courage, and she had both in equal measure. Meanwhile, her husband noticed her change. She was more cautious, more aware, and increasingly assertive. At first, he seemed surprised, perhaps even unsettled, by her growing independence. But over time, he began to respond differently. Conversations became more honest. Moments of tension were replaced with openness. And she noticed a softness in his expressions that had not been there before. She realized that by confronting reality rather than avoiding it, she was changing the dynamics of their relationship, creating a foundation built on truth rather than assumptions. She also began to take small actions to assert control over her life. She managed household decisions, organized finances, and even mediated minor conflicts that had been ignored before. Each step gave her confidence. She realized that empowerment did not come from rebellion or defiance, but from understanding, action, and careful thought. She was learning to navigate a world that had once seemed overwhelming. And each success, no matter how small, strengthened her resolve. Her friends and family noticed the change in her. They saw a young woman who had once been quiet and hesitant transform into someone strong, perceptive, and capable. Some expressed pride, others cautious admiration, and a few voiced concerns, warning that she was taking on too much. She listened, considered their advice, but ultimately knew that her choices were hers alone. She could not live according to others' expectations if she wanted to survive and thrive in this new life. The man she had married also began to change in response to her actions. He realized that she was not naive or passive, that she could see through pretenses, and that she would not be easily misled. He began to trust her judgment, to rely on her insights, and to share more of his own experiences and vulnerabilities. Slowly, a new balance emerged between them, a partnership based not only on attraction, but on understanding, respect, and shared responsibility. Despite the progress, challenges continued to arise. Old conflicts resurfaced. Family disagreements created tension. And unforeseen financial issues tested their ability to cooperate. Each time, she reminded herself to stay calm, to think carefully, and to act with intelligence and empathy. She discovered that resilience was built not in moments of comfort, but in facing difficulties head-on. And she was learning to meet each challenge with strength and clarity. There were moments of doubt, of course. She questioned her decisions, her ability to handle the pressure, and sometimes even the choice to marry a man with such a complicated past. But these moments were brief, replaced quickly by determination. She realized that fear was natural, but it did not have to control her actions. Courage, she learned, was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. As weeks turned into months, she began to see tangible results from her efforts. Relationships improved, household management became smoother, and her own confidence grew. She began to enjoy small victories as successful negotiation, a kind word from a relative, a moment of genuine laughter with her husband. These successes reinforced the lesson that life, no matter how complex, could be navigated with thought, empathy, and courage. She also began to reflect on herself, on the person she had been before this whirlwind began. She realized that her strength, patience, and courage were not new. They had always been there, waiting for circumstances that required them. The experiences of the past months had simply drawn them out, allowing her to see herself more clearly. She recognized the growth she had achieved and felt pride in the person she was becoming at the same time. She never lost her sense of wonder. Life was still unpredictable, and she often found herself amazed at the twists and turns that each day brought. Even small moments, a kind gesture, a heartfelt conversation, or a surprising revelation reminded her that life could be beautiful, even amidst challenges. She learned to savor these moments, to let them anchor her when difficulties arose, to remember that joy and struggle often existed side by side. Her husband, too, seemed to grow through this process. He became more open, more considerate, and more willing to share his vulnerabilities. The walls he had built over the years began to soften, revealing a man capable of empathy, understanding, and genuine love. She realized that their relationship was no longer defined solely by appearances, expectations, or social pressure. It was now a partnership, a collaboration, a journey they were taking together, step by step. There were still moments of tension and disagreement, as there always are in life. She learned to approach these moments calmly, to listen actively, and to respond with thoughtfulness rather than emotion. She discovered the importance of timing, tone, and empathy. Realizing that effective communication could resolve issues that once seemed insurmountable, each resolution, no matter how small, strengthened the bond between them and reinforced her sense of agency in the relationship. In quiet moments, she reflected on the journey so far from the sudden proposal to the extravagant wedding, the shocking revelations, and now the careful navigation of daily life. She realized that each challenge had been an opportunity for growth, for understanding, and for building resilience. She understood that life was rarely simple or predictable, but that it could be navigated successfully with courage, patience, and empathy. As she prepared for the next stage of their journey, she felt a quiet confidence. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, that surprises would still occur, and that life would remain unpredictable. But she also knew that she had the strength, intelligence, and resilience to meet these challenges. She felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she had already proven her ability to grow, adapt, and thrive in the face of uncertainty. And so, with determination, hope, and a clear sense of purpose, she moved forward. She had faced difficult truths, made important decisions, and taken control of her life in ways she had never imagined. The story was far from over, but she was no longer a passive participant. She was an active force in her own life, shaping her future with courage, wisdom, and love. The days ahead would test her further, challenge her patience, reveal even more about the man she had married. But she felt ready. She had learned the power of understanding, the value of empathy, and the importance of standing firm in her choices. No matter what came next, she knew she could face it with strength, grace, and determination, ready to continue the journey she had begun, one step at a time. The days after the wedding and the challenging revelations felt like a delicate balance between uncertainty and possibility. She had faced truths that had shaken her, learned to navigate complexity, and grown stronger in ways she had never imagined. Yet, life was not finished testing her. Each morning brought new questions, unexpected challenges, and moments that demanded courage, cared understanding, and heart. She noticed changes in herself that surprised her. The fear that had once made her hesitant had transformed into quiet strength. She was no longer overwhelmed by uncertainty. Instead, she approached life with careful thought and a willingness to face whatever came next. She realized that happiness and peace were not found in simplicity alone, but in the ability to navigate complexity with grace. The lessons she had learned gave her clarity, and clarity gave her power. Her husband, too, was changing. The walls he had built over the years were softening further, and she noticed a gentleness in his actions and words. He seemed more open, more willing to share his thoughts and fears, and more attentive to her perspective. The tension that had lingered after the wedding slowly began to ease, replaced by moments of connection and understanding that felt deeper than anything they had experienced before. They began to laugh together more easily, share private jokes, and discuss plans for the future without fear or hesitation. One afternoon, a significant turning point arrived. She received news from a trusted friend that revealed the full extent of some past difficulties. Her husband had faced financial losses, family disputes, and personal challenges that had shaped his life in ways she had only partially understood. The revelation was overwhelming at first, but instead of fear, she felt a growing empathy. She realized that these experiences were part of the man she had married, that they had shaped him, and that understanding them fully was essential to building a true partnership. She confronted him gently, sharing what she had learned and asking him to open his heart fully. There was hesitation at first, but eventually he began to speak honestly, revealing feelings, regrets, and hopes he had kept private for years. She listened with patience, offering support and understanding rather than judgment. For the first time, she saw the man not just as a husband or a figure of admiration, but as a human being with flaws, strengths, and a past that had tested him in ways few could imagine. The days that followed were filled with conversation, reflection, and planning. They spoke about their goals, their expectations, and how they could support each other moving forward. She began to see a life that was not perfect, but rich with potential and grounded in mutual respect. The challenges they had faced had brought them closer, creating a bond that was both real and resilient. She realized that love was not only about joy or attraction, but about facing difficulties together, learning from them, and growing stronger as a team. Her friends and family noticed the transformation as well. The young woman who had once seemed overwhelmed by her circumstances now radiated confidence, strength, and wisdom. Even those who had doubted her choices were impressed by her courage and ability to navigate complexity. They saw her thriving in a world that had once seemed intimidating, and their whispers of doubt slowly gave way to admiration. She had become a model of resilience, demonstrating that strength and love could coexist, even in difficult circumstances. As the weeks passed, she began to take more control over her life and household. She managed finances, coordinated plans, and even mediated conflicts with grace. Each small success reinforced her sense of agency and proved that she was capable of thriving, not just surviving. She discovered the importance of balance, being firm when necessary, gentle when required, and patient when outcomes were uncertain. These lessons strengthened not only her own confidence, but the foundation of her marriage as well. There were moments of fear and doubt, of course. Life still held surprises, and the past was never fully forgotten. But she had learned to face these moments with calm and clarity. She realized that uncertainty was not the enemy, it was an opportunity to exercise courage, empathy, and wisdom. Each challenge became a chance to grow, each obstacle a lesson in resilience. She understood that life was a journey, not a destination, and that true strength came from navigating its twists and turns with heart and intelligence. Her husband began to show his appreciation in ways she had never seen before. He included her in decisions, valued her insights, and acknowledged the ways she had helped him navigate his own life. The dynamic between them shifted, creating a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and trust. She noticed the small gestures, a hand on her back as they walked, a careful question about her feelings, a willingness to listen without judgment that reflected the growing depth of their connection. Together, they began to make plans for the future. They discussed travel, shared goals, and ways to support each other in personal and professional growth. She realized that the unpredictability of life could be exciting when faced with the right mindset. They laughed, dreamed, and planned together, building a shared vision that was rooted in reality, yet full of possibility. At the same time, she remained aware of the community around them. The town that had once been captivated by the wedding now watched their journey unfold with quiet curiosity. People noticed the strength and resilience she had developed. Some even sought advice from her on handling difficult situations. She became a quiet role model, not because she sought attention, but because her actions spoke louder than words. Her story had begun as a spectacle, but it had evolved into an example of courage, wisdom, and the power of human connection. One evening, she reflected on how far she had come. Sitting by the window, watching the sun set over the town, she thought about the young woman who had received a sudden, unexpected proposal. That woman had been anxious, unsure, and hesitant. But the experiences that followed the wedding, the revelations, the challenges, had transformed her. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. She realized that life's surprises, no matter how daunting, could be met with courage and grace. Her husband joined her, and they spoke quietly about the journey they had shared. There was laughter, honesty, and even moments of reflection on past mistakes. They acknowledged that life was not perfect, that challenges would continue to arise, and that uncertainty would always be part of the journey. But they also recognized the strength of their bond, the depth of their understanding, and the power of facing life together. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a recognition that they had built something lasting amid chaos and complexity. The community, too, began to see the story differently. No longer just a tale of a spectacular wedding, it became a story of resilience, courage, and growth. People admired how she had handled the challenges, how she had faced difficult truths with patience and intelligence, and how she had helped create a strong, respectful partnership. The whispers that had once questioned her choices gradually transformed into quiet admiration. She felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. Not the easy, comfortable peace of routine, but the profound peace that comes from knowing you have faced life's challenges and emerged stronger. She understood that happiness was not about avoiding difficulties, but about navigating them with heart, intelligence, and courage. She had learned to embrace life fully, with all its unpredictability, and to find joy even amidst challenges as the weeks turned into months. She and her husband continued to build their life together. Each day brought new experiences, lessons, and opportunities for growth. They faced problems, solved them together, and celebrated small victories. Their connection deepened, strengthened by honesty, empathy, and shared experiences. The young woman who had once been cautious and uncertain had become a strong, confident, and capable partner, shaping her own story with intention and courage. The true lesson of her journey became clear. Life would always be unpredictable, but strength, resilience, and understanding could turn challenges into opportunities. The wedding that had left people speechless had been only the beginning. What came after the revelations, the struggles, and the growth was what truly mattered. She had stepped into the unknown, faced it with courage, and created a life of depth, meaning, and love. And so the story concluded not with the spectacle of a wedding, but with the quiet triumph of human spirit. She had transformed fear into strength, uncertainty into clarity, and challenge into growth. She had discovered the power of patience, empathy, and resilience, and in doing so, had created a life that was rich, meaningful, and truly her own. The town, the friends, and even those who had doubted her were left amazed not by the grandeur of the wedding, but by the courage and wisdom of the woman who had navigated life's complexities with heart, grace, and determination. In the end, she understood that life's true marvels were not the moments that dazzled others, but the choices made in quiet strength, the growth achieved through challenges, and the love that flourished amid understanding and respect. The story that had begun as a spectacle became a tale of empowerment, resilience, and the extraordinary potential within every ordinary person willing to face life with courage and an open heart.